Hey, what's up everyone? I thought we would do a little walk through my bedding area. It's been basically about a year since I started doing some of this hinge cut bedding along my swamp transition line that you guys can see back here behind me. What I wanted to show you guys is just, I guess just some examples of where deer are actually bedding in those hinge cuts, but also some examples of areas where deer are bedding that's not in the hinge cuts, but it's new, I think, because of the hinge cuts. And it'll be easier to explain when we get up to a couple of them here. So yeah, we're basically just gonna be walking through, showing you deer beds, and I guess me trying to explain to the best of my knowledge, or I guess how I'm reading that bed, kind of what's going on. So stay with us. All right, we're gonna start right here. So this is kind of the northernmost point of my hinge cut kind of L-shaped bedding area that goes along my swamp transition line. So my big cattail marsh swamp, whatever you want to call it, runs back along here. This is kind of the area that I've hinge cut. So it's maybe, I don't know, 20 to 30 yards wide. And then you get back to kind of my main drier land, my main section of woods, and then my food plot is kind of just beyond some of these bigger trees over here. So I guess first starting in the hinge cuts, I guess what I noticed is just having, if you want to call it variety, seems to work the best. You can see there's some, I guess, a little bit higher, smaller hinge cuts up here that would be like that overhead canopy. There's other spots when we get up here, you might be able to see it. There's more just some big trees that aren't hinge cut. They're just knocked down. That is more side cover, not overhead cover. I guess what I've noticed is that some deer like overhead cover, some deer like side cover, some deer like being really tucked up in tight. I'll show you a couple beds up under this stuff. Others like being out more in the open, kind of like this bed right here. So if you can give them variety, that just seems to be, I guess that's what I did, because I didn't really know what would work best. And I guess some deer are using a little bit of everything here. So this is one bed. This one got used quite a bit. This was loaded up with hair. So this one, I mean, it's got some side cover, a couple hinge cuts here. It's in a good spot. I'd have to imagine whatever deer is laying here is like this, with its back to the swamp. We normally have a west wind here, so that would be blowing from the swamp right over this deer's back, and it could look out, you know, toward where my food plot is. And this deer has a pretty good view. Pretty good view. Now, if we come up here, this is kind of one that, you know, I honestly didn't know if deer would use this, if this was too tight. And it really didn't get used much throughout the summer, but I came out here a couple weeks ago and there was hair right here in this one. And there was another bed, I think it was just off to the side, right over here. So I'm guessing a couple of does. But this is one, I mean, you can see it is, I mean, you are crawling under here. And one of the reasons why I didn't think some of this would work, or maybe it didn't work earlier in the year, is I just don't know, I guess, if it has very good escape routes. I mean, there kind of is one here, but it's still pretty gnarly to get through this stuff. But there is some hair in these ones. You can even see if there's still some, but there was the other week when I came back here right after snow melt. But these did not seem to get used as much as the stuff that was more open. That's just what I noticed. These ones that are really tight overhead canopy, you're kind of crawling through, I did not see as much use as some of the more open stuff with side cover. One thing I may do to make something like this bed more desirable is this tree that I think I can't remember if I hinged this one right here or if I just notched it and let it fall over. I might just cut a section out of it, like right here or on this side, just something to have just a little bit better escape routes going in and out of this bed. So if they need to run that way, they can. And right now they're kind of walled off on this side. If they bed right here, they pretty much got to go straight out that way where I'm standing, or they might be able to snake through that one hole that we were already talking about. So here's one that these seem to work really well. And that's just knocking a big tree over and then putting a little bit of cover on top with some higher cuts. I've got another tree very similar to this down a little bit farther where I usually get deer beds all along the trunk of it. So right here, this was one where there was quite a bit of hair. There might even still be a little bit in there. Yeah, there's still some in there. And right on the back side of it, up against this stump, that was another one. Here's kind of another overhead cover one where there really isn't much for side cover at all. And I kind of did this more as I guess more as just like some screening, just to kind of fill this area in. This was really open. There really wasn't a whole lot of good, I mean, you can kind of see it's just kind of an area of dead trees except for these. I didn't find anything up in here recently, but in the spring, which was kind of cool, I actually had a trail camera right on this hinge cut tree right here. I just wanted to see, you know, were deer kind of using this main travel corridor, you know, what were they doing? And there was a small buck that would literally bed, I mean, right in front of my camera. He would lay down right here or just up underneath some of these, right in front of that camera. So this is just kind of another one, I guess, a different style of hinge cutting or bedding or whatever, where this buck kind of liked all overhead cover, no side cover really, at least in the springtime he did. Okay, so this is what we just walked through, what we just looked through. So this is where I was hinge cutting. I'm now kind of standing in an area that it's a lot of garbage trees. It's this some kind of like swamp grass that grows up in here, oftentimes gets matted down once it dies and once some snow starts falling. And then you've got my high ground up here. So before, this was kind of like just a complete dead zone almost. I mean, I know it's kind of thick right now, but all of this was just grass and trees standing. So I never found any beds in this stuff before. And what's kind of cool now is, like, if you look right here, this isn't in the hinge cuts, but it's just a high spot right up by this bigger cluster of trees. And there is a really well used bed right here. And what's kind of cool with this one, like, there's some even, looks like something was in here recently. There's some fresher droppings in here. What's kind of cool with this one is, to me, this almost seems like a east wind bed. So this animal's probably laying with its back up kind of against the roots of this tree, looking out into the swamp, and you can see there's a nice, here, we'll just get in it here. If I'm laying in this, I've got my back to where my high ground is, my food plot is. So I guess if I even tried to hunt, whatever deer was laying here would know I was walking back here, you know, before I even got to any of my stands. And they've got a really good, nice escape trail that goes right up to where a couple of those other beds were, just right out through the swamp. And they can go easy left and right back here to the right. So I found quite a few beds like this. And these ones seem to get used the most, are these kind of, I don't know what you'd want to call them, isolated or like satellite beds. They're not in my hinge cuts, but I think because I did hinge cutting, because I actually added some cover throughout this area, the deer now feel comfortable bedding on spots like this. Here's another one of those high spots. This one got used a ton. So all spring and summer, when I was back here doing some work, this would just be full of hair. There might have even been like a doe and fawn or two deer on here, because every dry spot of this little hump right here had hair all over it. And again, this is kind of, I mean, I've got a tree hinged right here and one back behind me, but it's kind of on the edge of some more heavier hinge cutting that I did back right along the swamp transition line. That's all the stuff that we already walked through. And then really in the front, it's pretty open. So this one to me, I mean, I guess I don't really know. This one they could almost, I feel like it's probably a west wind bed, looking this way, wind coming from the swamp. But if it was actually a group of does, they might have just bed here all year and kind of bed in a circle. Or if it was a doe and a fawn, they were each bedding, looking opposite directions or something like that. You can see they got a really nice escape trail going back that way, back into the swamp, through the actual stuff that I hinge cut before you really get to the wet swampy stuff. But this one was probably one of, if not the best bed that I had this year. All right, so now we're kind of standing back. We're closer to the swamp. This is an area that just has a lot more brush, a lot higher stem count. I did do hinge cutting. I mean, you can see some through here. I did a decent amount right there, but just this in general is just really good bedding. And I think just adding some more cover, especially even out just a little bit farther where I did more hinge cutting, really made kind of this area just explode with deer beds. And really, I mean, every high spot similar to this, there's usually a bed, or there was a bed at some point in the year. Like this one right here, this one actually has a lot of hair in it, so this was probably used recently. Pretty much all of these bigger trees, all of these high spots have beds under them. This is one over here that I kind of manicured right up against this, just because just the way some of this stuff fell, it just looked too good. I cleared out a lot of little stuff there, and a deer was bedding there. It looks like something maybe was bedding right here. So a lot of this could be does. Honestly, a lot of what I've already showed you, I think is doe bedding, just because I haven't seen many rubs on any of these trees or anything back here. Yeah, this one's got a decent amount of hair in it too. And there's quite a few here just within, you know, I'm standing in one. That other one with a bunch of hair was right there. I mean, to me, it looks like a couple of these other flattened, smaller high spots might have been where other deer were bedding too. All right, now I'm right on the edge of my swamp, and here's a couple other ones that were really good ones this year. So this one, there's a little bit of hair in it. There's a fresh track right there too. And then this one, both of these, all through the summer when I was working back here, I think maybe even tucked up in there might have been another one, but these were also both used quite a bit. Honestly, these were probably used before I did anything, just with where they are and with just how thick it is naturally right here. But you can see there's a big tree that I dropped right back behind here, a bunch of hinge cutting that I did. So the back side of these is really thick. I mean, it would be really difficult for something to come from this direction and get to whatever deer are bedding here. And then obviously they've got just a quick, easy escape right out into the swamp if something does bump them out of here. Got another bed right here by this big dead tree stump here, just right down at the base of it. There's a little bit of hair in it. See, there's a little bit right there. So this is right by those other two that we were just talking about, that are right at the edge of the swamp. And this area, which has really grown up, I mean, this is crazy thick now with all of the undergrowth, all of the high stem count stuff that's grown up. This is actually where I started my bedding area. It was just kind of this little, I'd say from like that tree right there to this big one. And a lot of deer before, when this was my only, I guess, designed bedding, I would usually have quite a few beds. So you had that one by the stump there, and then I'd usually have quite a few tucked up along this this big down tree. And then there were a couple more in here, kind of more under some of the big branches from that tree. Right up in here, like right here used to be a good one, and right here used to get used a lot too. But this doesn't seem to get used as much anymore. I don't know if it's just, it's so thick now with a lot of this stuff that they don't have, you know, just nice clear spots to lay on, or just with the other stuff that I've done, they've just found better spots. I'm not really sure, but now I really don't see many. So this is an area where I'm kind of trying to decide if I should try to just, I don't know, spray a little Roundup or Ground Clear or something, take these and nip some of this brush out of there so they have some more spots to lay. Back to this little food plot that I made. I used to hunt back here, and I don't anymore. I just kind of put some clover and some rye in here, and I just leave it alone. This, there is a few spots where deer were bedding up in here, but a lot of this got pushed down a lot more than I really wanted it to. So this is an area where I'm gonna be using these to just kind of just open up a few more pockets in here. But this area, really, really good travel through here. So the biggest buck that I had on camera this year, I had a camera on this big tree at this mock scrape right here. And basically where we're at, we just get up here a little farther. This is where my swamp turns. So the transition line goes from running north and south. It turns right here and runs east and west. And a lot of this that I hinge cut, I honestly haven't found many beds right in the hinge cuts, but right along the swamp transition line now and just back into the swamp, I found a lot. I did find a buck bed that I'll show you guys. And this portion of my swamp, I just think is just better in general for bedding, because you can kind of see there's a lot more trees. There's a lot more high spots, a lot more dead stuff, just a lot more cover than over there, where, I mean, even just looking through the trees that are right here, you can kind of see that's just more like an open sea of cattails. So here's a bed right here, right on the edge of the swamp. If I turn around, you know, the corner we were just talking about, so right over there, there's all the hinge cuts that I did. A lot of other stuff too, from this winter. There's a bunch of trees and stuff down. But like you can see, this whole area is just way thicker than kind of the sea of cattails on the north-south section of my swamp. So right here, this is a good bed. You can see there's entry and exit trails going that way. There's one right here going to the west. There's one leading right up, you know, into my hinge cuts. Another one going right that way. All right, so here's the one for sure buck bed that I found. I think a lot of the bucks, if they were bedding on my property, were bedding kind of back in this stuff. I haven't scoured through this very much, but I found this right after the season. I cut a good set of tracks basically along this trail in the snow, going out that way. So I backtracked them to here, and I found this, and there's, you know, there's a rub on this tree. There were a couple other rubs back just outside of this bed. But this had quite a bit of hair in it and was definitely being used still in the winter. It's still got quite a bit of hair in it now. And I'm glad I found this one. You know, it's awesome having one bedding right here, bedding this close to, you know, a lot of my, if you want to call it mainland, or the main stuff that I hunt. And I do actually have a tree stand that's kind of tucked back down in there. It's hard to see. It's not up real high. It's in a cluster of trees, but it's probably, I don't know, maybe 60 yards from here. So I definitely would have to, if I was going to hunt this, I'd have to get in here really, really quiet if I thought he was bedding here. And I also think what's cool is I noticed on my trail cams this year, a lot of deer were moving, when they were moving in daylight, or at least a lot of the bucks were moving on northerly or southerly winds. Not a whole lot of straight west or straight east, but whenever it was blowing north and south, they were moving. And to me, this looks like, just by the way this is sloped, that the deer would be bedded here. I'm gonna sit in the bed, would be bedded here on a north wind. So he would be bedded like this. I mean, he can't really bed the other way just with how this is sloping this way. So he'd be bedded here on a north wind. The wind would be blowing over his back. He'd be watching the swamp. And there is also a doe bedding area that we can walk over to, a pretty big one right up over here. So he would not only have the wind blowing over his back, but he could watch. If it was during the rut, he could watch and see if any does are getting up, starting to move around, and he could get up too. So that is at least what I make of this bed, just based on how it lays and what I saw on trail cams, and also finding that doe bedding area, you know, right up over there. All right, so this is that known doe bedding area that I was talking about. And it's just an area that is, I mean, you can kind of see it. All of this is just a little bit higher, even up over there, up over here. It's just a little bit higher than all the other stuff that has a lot of the cattails and stuff growing up in it. You guys will have to take my word for it that this is a bedding area. I mean, you can see there's droppings and stuff in here, but it's hard to see individual beds in all of this right now. But when I found that buck bed, which is just right up over there, when I found that in the winter, there was just a ton of tracks and trails and stuff leading right to here, and there was probably a dozen beds just in all of this little bit of higher ground here, this little area. I don't know if that's a dozen deer. I think it was a family group of probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 or so, and they were just bedding in different spots on different days and stuff. But yeah, this whole just a little bit higher area is where quite a few does bed. I have found beds in here, not just in the winter, but in other months. So I think that's the reason why that buck is bedding right there. All right, guys, there you go. I hope you enjoyed that. Hopefully it wasn't just me blabbering the whole time. Hopefully you got some value out of that. I always think it's valuable when I watch different habitat improvement videos, just to see examples of beds, kind of see maybe why deer are using them or what it looks like with the hinge cutting or with the structure around that bed, just so I can try to duplicate it myself back here. And I guess just to kind of wrap things up, you know, I'm by no means an expert on this stuff, but my property has 100% improved since I've done a lot of that hinge cut work. My woods used to be really, really open. I mean, even back there by the swamp transition line, it was pretty open, and I'm sure there was some bedding along there, but not nearly that much. I've never seen, you know, that much. And even here soon in the springtime, last spring, right after I did a lot of it, there were a ton of beds back through all that stuff. So I would say give it a try. And I guess if I've learned anything, it's variety. I don't know what the deer like better. It seems some like the overhead stuff, some like the horizontal cover, some like it really tight and cozy, others like it more open. So just try to give them a variety, let them tell you what they like best, and then don't get discouraged if deer aren't bedding right in your hinge cuts. Take a look, kind of like what I was showing you, just outside of it. You might be surprised what once was just a standalone tree or a standalone high spot that was out in the wide open. Now that you've added some cover, maybe now it's the perfect bedding spot. So get out, try some. Now is habitat season. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. We'll see you next time. Remember, be a sportsman, make a sportsman.